There, yes. Hello everyone, and welcome to this NNUG meetup. My name is Oddbjørn, and together with Håkan, we'll be your host for this evening. For the ones that are new to the group, welcome. See there. And here's a little bit about us. We are part of the .NET Foundation, and we are an independent user group with focus on .NET. We tend to focus on talks and subjects based on practical experience, and is by developers for developers. We are also always interested in people that have something interesting to present. If you have something you would like to present, please contact us either by email or by Twitter. And please subscribe to the YouTube and Twitch channel. We would also like to thank our sponsors. Without them, this meetup would not be possible to arrange on a regular basis. The NNUG board consists of these people. These are the ones that organizes the meetups, and please contact any of us if you have any questions or comments. We also have an NNUG Cloud Challenge right now, where you can complete a set of modules on Microsoft Learn. This is a competition that starts right now and will end after a week. From those who have completed the most modules, there will be a winner that will get a Microsoft backpack. We also, of the ones asking the best technical questions, after the talk, we will draw a winner of a Microsoft backpack. You can also get a digital badge by visiting the link on the screen. Today, we are so lucky to have Daniel Roth here to talk about ASP.NET Core updates in .NET 6. The presentation will start soon, and there will be a Q&A session afterwards in about 50 minutes from now. Please also ask questions during the talk that will be taken and asked after the talk. So without further ado, I give the word over to Daniel.
All right. Hi, everyone. Welcome. It's great to be here with all of you. Thank you for the kind introduction. It's really nice to be able to be with you, even though we're remote. Hopefully, we'll be able to be together soon in person. You know, fingers crossed. But for now, it's great to be able to join all of you in this great .NET user group. My name is Daniel Roth. I'm a program manager at Microsoft on the ASP.NET team, and I work on our web UI frameworks. I work on Blazor and ASP.NET Core and MVC, and I'm really excited to get to share with you the many updates and improvements coming to ASP.NET Core in .NET 6. So ASP.NET Core is your complete modern web framework for .NET. It comes with everything you need to build beautiful web UI and powerful backend services. You can build server-rendered UI using ASP.NET Core MVC or Razor pages. And you can build client-side web UI using popular JavaScript frameworks or using .NET with Blazor. For services, you can build standards-based HTTP APIs, real-time services with SignalR, or high-performance backend services with gRPC. Under the hood, ASP.NET Core provides a flexible hosting model, high-performance servers, and a rich set of built-in middleware to handle all of your cross-cutting concerns like localization and security. So no matter what kind of web, server, or cloud app that you're trying to build, ASP.NET Core provides a complete and fully integrated solution. Now, the next wave of improvements to ASP.NET Core is coming in .NET 6 later this year. The work planned for .NET 6 is broken down into various themes, epics, and user stories that are all published publicly on the Themes of .NET site. The main themes for .NET 6 include making it easier for new developers to get started with .NET, expanding support for building cross-platform native client apps, ensuring that .NET has everything you need to run natively in the cloud, ensuring that enterprises relying on long-term support or LTS releases have a nice smooth upgrade path, strengthening the .NET ecosystem, making development with .NET faster and more productive, and lastly, making sure that we continue to deliver on the promises of the .NET platform. Now, ASP.NET Core has a part to play in pretty much all of the .NET 6 themes. To make it easier to find all of the ASP.NET Core related work on GitHub, we've collected the relevant issues in the ASP.NET Core and .NET 6 roadmap issue, which is also linked to from the themes of .NET site. Now, how did we decide on all of these themes and enhancements? Well, they were all distilled from feedback from our community members like you. And we hope that you'll continue to participate in .NET 6 planning and planning of future releases. There's lots of great ways to participate and contribute. Please give a thumbs up on issues on GitHub that you really care about. We do look at those. Comment on issues with details about your scenarios and requirements and how the issue impacts you. Take a look at the design proposals and implementation PRs that we publish publicly on GitHub. Let us know if they meet your needs and how we can improve them. Also, try out our preview releases and submit issues with your feedback. A big thank you to everyone who has already contributed and continues to contribute. We hope you continue to do so. So ASP.NET Core has a lot of new functionality coming in .NET 6. Today, I'll try and highlight these particular areas of investment. We're simplifying the getting started experience with ASP.NET Core, specifically with the new minimal API model. We want you to be more productive in ASP.NET Core with .NET Hot Reload. We're doing better integration with front-end JavaScript frameworks, improved support for client web UI with .NET and Blazor. And we're going to be enabling native hybrid apps with .NET MAUI and Blazor, which I'll talk about later as well. So let's go ahead and take a look. So getting started with ASP.NET Core and .NET 6 is easier than ever before. We've dramatically simplified what is required to build your first ASP.NET Core app. You can build your first app with a single file and just a few lines of code. We're simplifying the ASP.NET Core hosting model to make this possible, and we're adding support for building APIs with minimal effort that don't compromise on features or productivity. We're also updating our templates to utilize the latest C# features, including features in C# 10. So let's go and see what it's like to get started with ASP.NET Core in .NET 6. All right, so I'm going to pop up Visual Studio. I've got Visual Studio 2022 here, which comes with .NET 6 in the box. I think Visual Studio 2022 is in the process of shipping a new preview release. Preview 3 was announced, and then I think they had to kind of put a pause on it because they were hitting CDN issues. Hopefully, by the time you're seeing this, if you're watching the recording or when you go to try it out, those have been resolved. This is an internal build. So what I'm going to do is do File, New Project, and I'm going to create an empty ASP.NET Core app. I'm going to pick this template right here, empty ASP.NET Core, because we want to start simple. I want you to imagine that you're a new user. If you've never used ASP.NET Core, if you're already an expert, then some of this stuff will probably be old hat, but hopefully still interesting. Let's call this my first app. And hopefully I haven't used that name before. Good. And we're going to use the new .NET 6 preview release. Great. All right, so this is the empty template. So hopefully you'll see that there's very little here. There's just basically, let's look at the Solution Explorer. There's just a program CS file. We've got some config files for any configuration data that we want, and that's pretty much it. If we look at the CS proj, we're targeting .NET 6. The templates now do have nullable reference type checking enabled, so that's pretty cool, but nothing else there. Really simple, minimalistic. That's what we're going for here. Okay, let's look at the code. Here's our ASP.NET Core app. That's the whole application. And honestly, even this is not quite minimal enough. Like some of the things here actually technically aren't required. This is adding some developer middleware for showing exceptions in the browser if an exception gets thrown. In the next update to ASP.NET Core, we're going to add this for you. So this will just go away. Here we're kind of expanding out, creating the web host builder, and then actually building the app. We can actually do that all in one step if we'd like. So let's do that right here. Web application.create. We'll pass in the args. I got passed into the app. And I think those 3 lines of code, that's all you need. That's all you need. Now, how is this possible? Well, part of the reasons why this is possible is due to a number of different things. Well, first of all, let me run it and show you that this actually does do something. This isn't just a code file that does nothing. Let me pull over the browser, popped over here on my other screen. But there it is. Let's put this side by side with Visual Studio. Hello world. So we have an endpoint. It actually returns some data. How is this possible? Well, a couple things. Well, first of all, we're introducing a new minimal hosting model in ASP.NET Core, a very simple way to basically create an ASP.NET Core app, wire up the server, and get it running. So that's this new web application API that you're seeing right here. We're also introducing a way to really simply create APIs. Basically, you can use this map get function, provide a route, and then a simple delegate for the code that you want to execute when that route is hit by a request, and that's it. So it has a very lightweight feel. You can, of course, still build APIs with API controllers and classes and all that stuff. That's all still there, but we think this is a really nice way to get started for, particularly for like a new user. We're also using the new C# features for top-level statements. There's no program main here. Like, where's program main? That's no longer required actually in C#. It's a little bit of ceremony that we've reduced in the application. You also notice that there's no using statements. We don't have any using directives, pulling in namespaces for the types that I'm using in this app. That's because we're leveraging a new feature called implicit global usings, where the SDK is actually bringing in a set of default using directives that are commonly used for ASP.NET Core applications. So we don't have to type those as well. So that's why it's so nice and simple. All right, so we can add a few more endpoints really easily. Let's just copy this and create a new line. Let's actually change. We'll change this top one to be hello. So that would be hello world. We can, in addition to just having something that returns a string, we can take route values as well. So let's define a new route that takes a name. So that's what this curly brace syntax means, is we want to grab this value from the URL path. And then now we will pass that into our function right there. Let me give myself a little bit more space. Perfect. And then instead of saying hello world, let's use some C# string interpolation. And we'll say hello to whatever that name is, just like that. Okay, save. I'm going to rerun the application. Running again. Okay, so we don't have any route at the root of the app anymore. Let's make sure our old hello world endpoint is still there. It is. And then now let's say hello, damn, and ta-da. Okay, yeah, so we can bind route values. We can also return more than just simple strings. Let's return a complex type. So let's, I don't know, what should we return? Let's call this a dog. This one I don't think will take any parameters. And instead of a string, let's return an actual object. We'll create a new dog. I'll just use an anonymous type. Let's give it a name. What should we call it? Let's call it Fluffy, and give it a kind. Let's make it a corgi, and that looks good enough. All right, so let's save that, and let's rerun again. And let's see if we can now get to our dog. Yeah, we can. And you notice that we're getting JSON data back automatically. This minimal API model is opinionated in that if you return an object, it will serialize it as JSON. You can, of course, configure that to do other things, but by default, that's what it will do, just out of the box. All right, cool. What about like taking in some data? Let's do something a little bit more elaborate here. Let's create like a CRUD API. I want to have a get action that's going to return some to-dos. Let's do some to-dos. Where am I going to get my to-dos from? Normally, I'd have like a database or something like that. I don't want to mess around with setting that up. So I'm just going to create a little list right here of, I need a type. Let's create a type. We'll put that down at the bottom. Let's create a new C# record type. And let's make a to-do have an ID, a title, and a Boolean is done. Great. So that's nice and simple. So we'll have a list of to-do. Okay. And then I just want to return the full list of to-dos when I come here. And that's just a Visual Studio thing. Oh, I need a new. Sorry about that. Okay, so I should now be able to get my list of to-dos. Let's run and make sure that that's working. All right, let's go to slash to-dos. Okay, got an empty JSON array. Perfect. Okay, so now I also want to be able to get individual to-dos and add to to-dos. So let's do this. Let's add a map get with an ID this time. And let's make that an int ID that we'll get here, and we'll do something naive just to get started. We'll return the IDth that particular to-do. I know there's obviously some error checking. We'll add the error checking in just a second, and then we want to be able to post, right? So instead of map get, let's do map post to our to-dos list. All right. So now what we want is to be able to send a request to slash to-dos. And we want to take in a to-do, right? So let's have a to-do here that we're gonna get to our action, and then we need to do some stuff to actually like add that to our list. So I think we need a little bit more than just one line for this one. So let's go ahead and do this. All right, and to save a little bit of typing, I'm just gonna copy in this code for the post. All right, so what are we doing here? We're going to take our to-do that we got in, and we're going to create a to-do with a particular ID. We're going to increment the count for that new to-do. So to-do with, this is the record type syntax where we want to create a new record with just a slightly modified data. So we got a new to-do with the ID set to whatever the current count of to-dos is. We'll add that to our list. Now, when you create a new resource with an HTTP API, you don't typically want to return like just a normal 200 OK. You want to return a specific status code. You want to say 201. I created something for you. And that created response typically should also contain a location header, an HTTP header to let the user agent know where's the resource that I just created. So we can do that with minimal APIs. There's in .NET 6 Preview 7, we have this results helper type that has a whole bunch of pre-built results that you can just return. So we can say results.created, and here's the URI for my created resource and the new to-do. Okay, so that should work great. The only problem is I don't have a really great way to test this yet because I don't have any way to submit post requests to do to-dos. So how can we do that? Well, a really easy way would be to enable Swagger support or Open API support. Open API is a specification for describing APIs, and it has a nice little like UI, built-in UI that you can use for testing APIs. Can we use Open API support with minimal APIs? And the answer is yes. Yes, we can. Okay, so I'm going to enable also Open API support for my min APIs. Let's go ahead and add I want to add a new package. So manage NuGet packages, and I'm going to add this package called Swashbuckle. Swashbuckle is a wonderful .NET open source community-based package for enabling Open API support for ASP.NET Core applications. So we'll install that. Great. Okay, and then there's a little bit of boilerplate we need to do to enable Swashbuckle. So first thing, we actually need to configure some services to turn on Swashbuckle. So I do actually need that builder back. Let's get the builder back. How do you configure services with this new hosting model? Well, we're going to grab that builder. Let's get the web application create builder. Okay, and then here we'll just build the app again like we had before. Builder.build. Awesome, wonderful IntelliSense from VS 2022. And then here's where we can configure services. If you're familiar with ASP.NET Core, you might be used to like having a startup class where you have like a configure services method. In this model, you just call into the builder.services property. So we'll configure our services right here, builder.services, and then we can add services right here. And I've got some services I want to add. Let's add these guys. I'll just copy this in. All right. So let me get rid of the using statement, using directive, sorry. So we're going to add Endpoint API Explorer. That's the piece of ASP.NET Core that knows how to look at all my min API endpoints and figure out what their signatures are and what types they take in and return. And then we're going to add the Swagger gen services so we can actually create a Swagger doc. Now we also need to add endpoints for my Open API spec and for the Swagger UI. So I'm going to add those down below. Where should we put them? Let's put them right down here at the bottom. So use Swagger. We'll expose the Open API spec, this swagger.json file, and then use Swagger UI will actually give you a nice test UI that you can use. So hopefully I've done that all right. Let's see if that now works. Okay, 5. Okay, so if I go to /swagger, yeah, all right, cool. We've got our nice little test UI that we just wired up. And you can see all of our endpoints. We've got that post action that we created previously. So let's see if we can try this out. Let's try it out. And here's the request body. What do you want to do here? Let's get some sleep. Everyone probably needs a little bit more sleep, right? Nope, not done yet. Haven't got enough sleep. And let's execute that. And let's see what we got. Okay, so here's the response body. And it's saying, yep, we got our 201 status code. That's what we wanted, 201 created. There's the resource that we just created, and it's got a location header telling us exactly where it's at. Let's see if we can get that particular to-do. Let's try out the to-dos get request that takes an ID. So we'll request the first to-do. We'll execute that. And yeah, there's our to-do to get some sleep. All right, so there's simple CRUD actions that you can do with the minimal API model and also Open API integration. You're probably also wondering, well, what about like HTML? Like, what if I want to build some web UI with this model? Can I do that too? And the answer is, of course, yes. You can also build MVC applications, Razor Pages applications. Let's add a little bit of UI to this app as well. So in the services, I'm going to do builder.services.add. I'm going to use Razor Pages for this, just because it's a really simple way. Just create a page, and you got some dynamically generated HTML. And then for the endpoints down at the bottom, we will say app.map Razor Pages. Okay. And then now we just need to add a Razor page. So let's go into our project. We'll add a new folder. We'll call this pages. And we just need to add a page. So we'll add a new Razor page. We'll just add an empty one. And index.cshtml sounds great. Okay, so we've got a little bit of Razor syntax now. Let's just dynamically generate a header here. The current time is, and then call into some C# code, datetime.now. So this is a Razor page that will respond to requests and hopefully execute this Razor logic to generate this H1 header. Okay, if I did that right, we should be able to rerun again. All right, yeah, and then at the root of the app, the current time is, and it's currently about 8:30 in the morning here. So that's the new minimal API model, minimal hosting. This is ASP.NET Core simplified, so it's got as smooth an on-ramp as possible for building new applications. The existing startup.cs pattern that if you've used ASP.NET Core before, that's still there. It still works just as it did before. Controllers are still there. But we think this is a way that we can introduce concepts to new users gradually without having to throw, the whole kitchen sink at them all at once. That's min APIs. Okay, let me go back to slides. Where did my slides go? Okay. Now, minimal APIs aren't just about simplicity. They also enable much better performance. Min APIs require way fewer moving parts and are close to raw middleware in performance. They're also about twice as fast as traditional API controllers because there's fewer things happening in the pipeline. That's what this graph is showing up in the upper right-hand corner, the requests per second API performance for min APIs versus just raw middleware and a full controller. ASP.NET Core in .NET 6 is honestly the fastest web framework that we've ever shipped. It has significant performance gains across a wide range of scenarios. Authentication is faster thanks to upgrading to the new JOT token library. Throughput on Linux is faster. And working set memory has been dramatically reduced, particularly for HTTPS connections. We typically use a set of public benchmarks called the Tech Empower benchmarks to sort of measure how ASP.NET Core is doing, in particular as it in comparison to other frameworks that exist in the ecosystem. Tech Empower is a independent set of benchmarks that compares performance across a wide range of development stacks. And it's great to see the progress that ASP.NET Core has been making. This is like a really recent run. I think it's like within the last couple of weeks that they did this test run. This is a like composite score of all the different Tech Empower benchmarks. Like this JSON benchmark is basically how fast can you return some JSON data? There are a bunch of benchmarks that involve databases and running queries, and Fortunes is a sort of an end-to-end app that does a whole bunch of things all at once. Updates, just plain text is just how fast can you return a response, like any text at all. And then they calculate a weighted composite score from all of those benchmarks to sort of rank all the stacks. And as you can see, ASP.NET Core is doing great. We're number 8 right now in the top 10. The ones that are above us, I think Actix is a Rust-based framework. I think it's also from someone at Microsoft. The other ones I've never even heard of before. What about ones that are maybe more well known, like Node.js down here at 60? The Java frameworks are below as well. So ASP.NET Core doing really well in terms of performance. Industry-leading performance, and that's really important. The faster the performance of the stack, the more your apps can scale, and the more money you can save on your server resources. ASP.NET Core is used by some of the largest properties at Microsoft, like Bing is already running on .NET 6 and taking advantage of the phenomenal performance that you get with ASP.NET Core. All right. So that's performance. We also want to make sure that you have a developer experience that is fast and iterative and fluid. In .NET 6, we're doing a bunch of work to speed up build times and to make development more productive. We're making optimizations across the .NET platform to speed up builds and improve app startup performance. One of these optimizations is actually switching the Razor compiler, the thing that takes your .cshtml files or .razor files if you're building Blazor apps and converts them into C#, and turning that compiler, changing it from using its current 2-phase approach to use the new source generators feature in Roslyn. This makes building your views, pages, and components way faster. This work also paves the way to support Visual Studio Edit and Continue in Razor files for .NET 6. So that's coming as well. We're also adding support for .NET Hot Reload across .NET 6. .NET Hot Reload is the ability to rapidly update the code of your running app, like while it's running, without losing its app state. ASP.NET Core and Blazor will fully support Hot Reload in .NET 6, as well as all of the other UI stacks that we ship in .NET, like .NET MAUI and the mobile and desktop UI stacks as well. Here's a graph of the updated Razor build performance, comparing build performance between .NET 5 and .NET 6. These numbers are actually a little bit old for .NET 6, so I think we've actually doing better than this now, but even with these numbers from like back in March, the build times are already about twice as fast, which was great to see. All right, but what I want to show you next is Hot Reload and how that makes building your apps way, way better. Okay, so to show Hot Reload, let's create a new application. And I'm going to actually create a Blazor server app for this one. Blazor App 3 sounds like a great project name. All right. And let's get the Solutions Explorer back out. Okay, so here's our Blazor server project. Now, the trick that I've done here is, first of all, I'm using Visual Studio 2022, the latest preview. You're going to want to get that. And then there's an option that you can select. If you go into Projects and Solutions and select ASP.NET Core, there's this auto build and refresh option which allows you to turn on hot reload. Okay, so that's what I'm doing. That will enable hot reload support when you run without debugging. We're enabling hot reload for the debugging scenarios as well. That functionality is a bit still in the works, shall I say. It doesn't quite work yet in VS 2022. Hopefully in the next preview, not preview 3, but preview 4, that will be working much, much better. But for right now, we'll be doing it with without debugging. So once you've turned that on, then we should be able to Control F5. And we'll close the previous app. Okay, so here's our Blazor server application. It's got the counter. You can click, count goes up. Got a little generated table of weather forecast data. All right, let's see if we can edit this application. So I'm going to go into the code for the home page, and let's add some excitement to this hello world. And I'm going to click save. Ready? Here we go. 3, 2, 1, save. And whoop, it just updates. And it's actually really fast. Like, let's say hello whoops. I type. Oh no. I was talking to the meeting organizers, and I said, like, there's going to be some demo fails in this because I'm using all preview bits. Okay, there we go. When Visual Studio needed a moment. Just needed to pause. I am using preview bits of VS, of .NET 6, so there will be some demo fails, almost certainly. So hello, everyone. And then just try it again. Save. And it just updates. So super duper fast. Okay. Welcome to your new app. Let's fix that too. Okay, great. We can, in addition to changing markup, we can also change like C# code. Like this attribute value is actually a C# string that's being passed to the survey prompt component. So let's change some C#. Isn't this so cool? And then here we go. Save. It just updates. So there it is. Isn't this so cool? All right. We can also add components. Like let's take this counter component that's currently on its own page. Let's add one to the home page. So let's add counter and then save. And now we got a counter on the home page. We'll click it a bunch of times. And what's better than one counter? Is obviously 2 counters. So let's add another one. We'll save. Now, the thing I want you to notice is now we got 2 counters, but the count from the previous counter is preserved. Like we didn't lose that app state. It's still there. So if you're like deep in like a big old form and you're trying to tweak something, or you're like in a nested tree view and you want to just tweak the UI a little bit without losing where you're at in the app, .NET Hot Reload enables that. Okay, we can also go into, let's go into the code for the counter, and let's change this to have a parameter now. So we'll add a parameter, and this will be a property called increment amount. We'll give it a get, set, and we'll default it to 1. All right, and then plus equals increment amount instead of incrementing by just 1 every single time. All right, now this is interesting. So I'm gonna save this. So it says it updated the page. Now watch what happens when I click these counters. I'm clicking, and nothing's happening. Why is nothing happening? Did the app not get updated? Well, the app did get updated. Like we have an increment amount property, but this initialization logic happens very early in the component, the life cycle of that object. So actually setting this to 1 hasn't even happened yet. If all we did is like, blip the new code into the app. So that's why that's doing that. So when you're using .NET Hot Reload, it does kind of change how you have to think about what's happening to the app as you're developing. To get this code to actually run, we can just move away from that component and come back. And now when I click on things, it's working just fine. So just heads up, that's Hot Reload can sometimes trip you up if you don't remember what's actually happening. You didn't really restart the app completely. All you did was update the code. But now that we've done that, we should be able to go to our counters and set increment amount. Let's change it to something other than 1 for that top component. Let's change it to 10. And so now that's, oh no. Well, I guess we just had another error. Actually, well, we'll debug that later. So let's try again. Oh, I have myself a no writer was cached for the property. Interesting. Well, I think that's increment amount. Yeah, that's interesting. I guess I need to restart for this. That shouldn't happen. That was a bug, but we'll get that fixed. But is it now incrementing by 10? Yeah. Okay. So now it's incrementing by 10. But I should be able to change this. And There we go. Yeah, okay. That time is successfully updated, and now it's incrementing by 5. Okay, so you can very quickly make changes to your app while still preserving app state. Notice that the incrementing by 10 was the count was still there even after I changed the amount that we increment by. So that's .NET Hot Reload coming in .NET 6. Another really cool thing, by the way, is also the ability to hot reload changes to your CSS files. It's not just your C#. For example, let's say I want to tweak the styling of this app. Let's go find this CSS file on the site.css. Cool. If we do this drop-down arrow, you see that this enable CSS autosync feature has been enabled in Visual Studio. And this is really great because not only does it doesn't just update on save, it like updates as you type. So if I like change the background color, come on, it will. Okay, if I change the background color to something else, no, come on. There we go. Okay, so now let's change it to blue. Oh man, you're killing me here. Okay, so it's doing on refresh, but it should do it on type. Let's see if we can get it one more time. Red. Yeah, commit. Shit. Well, let me try restarting the app. Maybe we hit some issue with VS. Okay, so that's working. How about blue? No, well, okay. Preview bits, like I said, there will be some demo failures, but when it's working, you can actually type CSS and see it update in real time. We'll have to redo that demo at some other future point. Well, that's Hot Reload. It will work for CSS, and it also works for .NET. It's gradually improving. It should be in a really great shape actually in next month's release in Preview 4. But for right now, there's definitely some neat stuff that you can try out. All right, what if you're an MVC dev? What's new for MVC developers? MVC now has support for CSS isolation. This is the ability to have a CSS file that's like scoped to a particular page or view. This is a feature we actually added for Blazor in .NET 5, where you could have CSS styles scoped to a particular component. In .NET 6, you can now have CSS styles scoped to a particular viewer page. We've added support for streaming, like full async streaming, where you can have like a async enumerable from an action that streams data down to the client. And we no longer will buffer all that data, even at the serialization layer. We've updated system text JSON so that it can do async streaming all the way down to the wire. iAsync disposable is now supported in MVC. We're updating all of the MVC templates, actually all of the templates for ASP.NET Core that use CSS to use Bootstrap 5 in .NET 6. And we've made some nice, small but nice improvements to our Open API support to improve how the Open API specs get generated. I'll give you a quick demo of CSS isolation for MVC apps. Let's go and open up an existing project that I've got here. All right, so this is a .NET 6 project. It's a MVC Razor page application, actually. And what I've done is I've gone in to this privacy. Let me actually go ahead and run it first so we can see what it looks like before I make some changes. Okay, so this is just the default template. It's not updated to Bootstrap 5 yet, by the way. That's coming in September. So that hasn't quite landed yet, but that'll land in RC1. All right, so we have a home page and we've got a privacy page, and they both have their own H1 headings, and they're both styled as black text. But what I did is I added a cshtml.css file for the privacy page. And what that means is that any styles that I put in this CSS file will only apply to the privacy page. They won't apply to anything else. So I can go in here and have a fairly generic CSS selector. Let's just select all H1s, right? All H1s only for this privacy page, and change the color to be pink. Okay. Now this happens at build, so I actually have to rebuild and rerun to see the effects of the change. But now, hopefully, I should be able to go to the privacy page, and it is pink. Now, how's that working? If we go and look at the source, and we look at the H1 heading here, you'll see that as part of the how the app was built, the H1 heading for that privacy policy heading now has like a custom hash ID. And if we look at the sources, like the generated CSS styles, the CSS selector that we originally wrote has been modified at build time to account for that particular hash. So that's how we're scoping the CSS styles to just that particular page. All right. So page and view specific CSS styles coming to MVC and Razor pages in .NET 6. All right. If you're a JavaScript fan, we're also doing a bunch of improvements for how ASP.NET Core integrates with popular front-end JavaScript frameworks like Angular and React. We have updated the built-in Angular and React templates to the latest versions, Angular 12, React 17. That is a lot of versions. Imagine .NET 17. Maybe someday we'll get there. We've also changed how the Angular and React templates work. We're now leveraging the Webpack dev server functionality for proxying requests to the backend ASP.NET Core application. In previous releases, the way we would integrate with Angular and React is we actually built custom middleware that would proxy requests from the ASP.NET Core app to the backend, to the Angular React app's dev server. So you would start the Angular React app with their dev server, and then the ASP.NET Core application would proxy requests over to that dev server, so that things like their hot module replacement features would still work. That required us to do like very specific integrations for those frameworks because we had to know how to deal with their particular CLIs. The nice thing about flipping that around, which is what we're doing in .NET 6, is that the ASP.NET Core app doesn't have to have any specific integration for a particular framework. It can be much more generic, which enables you to have much better support for other popular JavaScript frameworks that we might not have out-of-the-box support for. Like maybe you like Vue, or you really want to use Svelte, or Banana. I'm making Banana up. I don't know if there probably is a JavaScript framework called Banana, but there's a JavaScript framework every month. So whatever the new framework is, you'll be able to use it based on this new pattern. Let me show you what I mean. Okay, so let's go back to Visual Studio. Well, I think we can shut down this application. Okay, and I have a solution that I've set up with the out-of-the-box Angular and React templates. Okay, so let's see what these guys look like. So here's Angular, here's React. And the thing I want you to notice is like this. So this has an Angular app in it. That's what this client folder is. That's basically the output of like the Angular CLI just tucked into this little folder. But before, if you looked at an Angular app with ASP.NET Core, in the startup class, we had a whole bunch of code that was SPA specific and Angular specific. Not a whole lot of code, but there were API calls that you had to make that were basically specific to Angular. If you look at the new program CS file, no startup because we're using the new min hosting model that I showed you earlier, there's nothing in here that's SPA or Angular specific. It's nice and clean. Instead, we've got a bunch of custom, some configuration of the Webpack dev server that's used by Angular to set up the HTTPS using the ASP.NET Core dev cert, and to set up proxying so that you can call backend APIs in the ASP.NET Core app. So let me show you what I mean. Let me go ahead and run this. So when I run this Angular app, two things are going to happen. So first, there's the ASP.NET Core app. It just fired up. And now the Angular dev server is firing up, and the app it's got a little dev feature that's gonna wait for the Angular dev server to be responsive. That's what it's waiting for. And as soon as it's ready, it will then redirect the browser to the Angular app, which is then proxying any requests that are needed to the backend ASP.NET Core app. So this this HTML, that's coming from Angular. So that's coming from the Angular dev server. But when I click on fetch data, this is calling a backend API in my ASP.NET Core app to actually fetch the weather data. That request is going through the Angular dev server and proxy to the ASP.NET Core app, and then the data comes back to the Angular application. So this is a much simpler model, and it extends much better to other frameworks. So one of the exercises we did on the team is we just took like the new templates, the Angular and React templates, and we copied them. And then it took that client app folder and threw in a Vue application. So this is not a built-in project template in ASP.NET Core and .NET 6, but this is something that you or someone in the community could easily do. So we just took a default Vue app, threw it in here, and then we looked up in the Vue docs, like, well, how do you do proxy config in Vue? And there's, slightly different stuff that you have to wire up in order to get the SSL certificate to be used correctly and to proxy request to the back end, but fairly boilerplate code. And now, if we set this as the startup project, we've got we've got two apps running on the same port. That's what we got. So let me close the Angular app. Let's put this down. There we go. And now let's run the Vue app again. Same little pattern, right? We're gonna fire up ASP.NET Core. And it fires up the Vue dev server. It's going to wait for the Vue dev server to be up and running, and then redirects. And now we've got a Vue application. Okay, so really easy to now integrate with other SPA frameworks. We're hoping that the community will really jump on board here and maybe build out SPA templates for a whole variety of existing JavaScript-based platforms, whatever you'd like. So that's the new SPA support in .NET 6. How are we doing on time? Whoa, time is like blowing through. We're gonna need to move a little faster. All right, Blazor. We gotta look at Blazor. So what if you're not a JavaScript fan? What if you would prefer to write all of your code in .NET? Well, that's what Blazor is for. Blazor is part of ASP.NET Core. It's a client web UI framework based on .NET and C# instead of JavaScript. And we're shipping a whole bunch of improvements to Blazor in .NET 6. Hot reload, we just saw that's coming to Blazor. We're adding support for WebAssembly ahead of time compilation for much better runtime performance. We're shrinking the download size of Blazor WebAssembly apps fairly dramatically, and enabling you to actually add native dependencies to your Blazor WebAssembly apps. Like if you want to use Skia or SQLite from your Blazor WebAssembly app, you'll be able to do that. And then there's a whole bunch of other stuff that I'm just going to gloss over, but there's a lot of things coming to Blazor, way more than we have time to cover here. But I do want to show you at least the first few of these features. The first is the improved runtime performance with ahead of time compilation. So Blazor today runs on a IL interpreter. It executes your DLLs by interpreting the IL instructions, which is fine, but it's not particularly fast from a runtime perspective. It's not great for like CPU intensive tasks. In .NET 6, we're going to enable you to use a new tool chain to ahead of time compile your Blazor WebAssembly apps to WebAssembly, and that dramatically improves the runtime performance. It does have a trade-off of a larger app download size. Like whenever you AOT .NET code to the underlying native instructions, it tends to get bigger. So that'll be a trade-off that you'll have to think about. But the runtime performance is way, way better. Let me show you what I mean. So I'm going to pop up this other application. This one's like a simple image editing app. Where is it? Looks like I need to find project solution. And where are you? My picture fixing application. This one. Yeah. Okay. So here's Picture Fixer. So I'm just going to go ahead and run this. And since I'm running in dev, this is going to initially just use the IL interpreter runtime for Blazor WebAssembly. So this is a simple little app. You can like pick one of these images, and then it's got this little editing UI. And what it does is it allows you to erase things. It has a C# implementation of a patch match algorithm. Where is that? That's in here. Yeah, this guy right here. So this is actually an implementation derived from this open source implementation. So thank you to this person who actually originally wrote this. But this kind of looks at the pixels around the area that you selected and tries to basically make it all match. So you can use it as kind of like an eraser. So let's say we want to make this tennis player's life a little more interesting by erasing the ball. Doot, 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 poof, it just goes, okay? Now, if I try to do something a little bit bigger though, like let's try and remove this entire logo. We can do that. Let's see. It's crunching, running through the algorithm, going, gone. Okay, so I mean, it works. And the artifacts that you're seeing there remaining, that's just the artifacts of the patch match algorithm. It's not because it was larger. But it did take a little bit of time, right? It took like 10 seconds. So can we do better? And the answer is yes, we can do better for CPU intensive tasks like this using ahead of time compilation. So how do you use ahead of time compilation? Well, first of all, you're going to need to get the .NET WebAssembly build tools. And this is like an SDK add-on to the .NET 6 SDK. This is a new concept in .NET 6 where we have these optional workloads that you can add on to the SDK. The way you get them is using this new .NET workload command. So you can see all the workloads by running .NET workload search. There's a bunch of them for MAUI, and there's the WASM tools workload right there. Now, the way you install it is like .NET workload install, and then the name of the workload that you want, so WASM tools. So you'll need to run that, and make sure you run it from an elevated command prompt, because it does require elevated permissions. I've already run that, so I'm not going to do that. But if you want to make sure that it actually installed, you can run .NET workload list and see all the workloads that you currently have installed in your SDK, and you can see I already have WASM tools installed. The other thing you do to enable ahead of time compilation is you go into your Blazor WebAssembly project and set run AOT compilation true in the project template. Okay. Now, ahead of time compilation for WebAssembly is not a fast process. Like, it takes a little while. I think ahead of time compiling this app to WebAssembly took me like 10 minutes. So it's not something you're going to want to do on every single build. So instead, what we do is we do it on publish. It's like a publish optimization step, very similar to the linking step that we already do in Blazor WebAssembly apps today. Okay, so you'll need to publish your app. So you do like .NET publish, do a release publish, and when you do that, that's when the ahead of time the WebAssembly toolchain will kick in and ahead of time compile your app. And so then go get something to drink, go talk to your family for a little while or whatever it is, because it takes a little bit. I've already done that, so I'm going to go ahead and run the ahead of time compiled app. So the picture fixer server.exe. All right, so this is running on port 5001. So we have the old version and then the ahead of time compiled version. Let's see, make sure that still works. So can we get rid of the ball? Yep, we can get rid of the ball. Let's try and get rid of this logo. And boom, yes. All right, 0.6 seconds as opposed to 10.6 seconds. So it's like over 10 times faster when you ahead of time compile the code. So it's way, way faster. It is bigger. The app size does get larger, so you'll have to consider that trade-off when you decide whether or not you want to use this. Many apps are perfectly fine on the IL interpreter, honestly, but if you have some CPU-intensive stuff, AOT is there for you. All right, so that's ahead of time compilation. I got a couple more minutes. Blazor WebAssembly trimming is also way better in .NET 6. In .NET 5, like a minimal Blazor WebAssembly app, when it was published and trimmed and compressed and all these things, weighed in at about 1.7 megabytes. In .NET 6, the IL trimmer is way smarter. Also, we can use the same tool chain that we use for ahead of time compilation to actually trim the runtime itself, like pull out runtime features that you don't need. For example, the big one is like if you enable invariant mode, like if you don't need a lot of the globalization features that .NET provides, you can just turn on invariant culture and it will trim out a whole bunch of stuff that's used for globalization, and that can reduce the WebAssembly bundle size way down. So actually in .NET 6, min Blazor WebAssembly app is about 1.1 megabytes, which is like a 35% size reduction, which is pretty darn awesome. I do have a sample app published. Well, a friend of mine helped me publish at minblazor.anthonychu. Thank you, Anthony, for helping with this. .com. This is published on the Azure Static website, Azure Static Web App service. And if we look at the download size of this guy, let's see, we have to clear out all the caches. Let's clear out the site cache and make sure that we also have disabled caching. Okay, and then full refresh. Control-Shift-R, and yeah, so right down the bottom, this app is just 1.1 megabytes. We might get a little bit smaller than that in .NET 6, but still much better than earlier releases. Cool, so that's minimum Blazor applications. All right. For web applications, there's a bunch of other improvements coming to ASP.NET Core that unfortunately we don't have time to go through them all, but HTTP3 is coming. If you're deploying to IIS, we now have a form of shadow copying that you can use to avoid binaries being locked when you're trying to deploy your application. So simpler deployments with IIS. We've enabled HTTP logging and W3C, the W3C logging format in ASP.NET Core. There's a new SignalR C++ client. gRPC now has retries and load balancing support. So a bunch of other great stuff that are coming. Definitely go and check it out. That's all for web apps. But the last thing that I want to show, and I know I'm right at time, I'm gonna take a few more minutes because I want to show a little bit of MAUI, is what if you want to write a native app? Like, what if you're a web developer and you need more than what the web platform offers you? Like, what if you need to actually have full access to the native capabilities of the device? Well, a great option is to build what's actually called a hybrid app, a native hybrid app, where you take your web development skills and tech and use it to build a native application. Typically, this takes the form of having some sort of web view control or embedded browser inside the native application that you use to render HTML and CSS. So you can use web tech, but then still be able to access the native capabilities of the device. This has a bunch of advantages. You get to reuse your skills. You have full access to native capabilities. You can use both native UI and web UI if you want, like mixture of the two UI patterns. And this can really significantly reduce app development time. So in .NET 6, we are enabling support for building hybrid apps with .NET and Blazor, where you can have a Blazor web view embedded in a native application and use your Blazor skills to build native client apps. In particular, we're doing this in partnership with the .NET MAUI folks. .NET MAUI is our new .NET multi-platform app UI framework for building cross-platform native UI. It enables you to build a single .NET application that can run on desktop and mobile, Windows, Mac, iOS, and Android. It's the evolution of Xamarin Forms, but extended to more platforms and with a modernized architecture. So .NET MAUI and .NET 6 definitely worth checking out. And what we're doing with the .NET MAUI folks is building a Blazor web view control for .NET MAUI. So you can have a Blazor hybrid app that can run on all those platforms where the UI is built with HTML and CSS, but you have full access to the native capabilities of the device. Let me show you real fast what I mean. So I'm going to go into Visual Studio. Where did my Visual Studio go? Just had it. This guy. Okay. And I'm going to create a new project. To get MAUI, again, you need to install an optional workload. So .NET workload install MAUI. And if you do that, we should have MAUI templates. So here's a .NET MAUI app that will be like XAML based. And then we have a .NET MAUI Blazor app, which we can use our Blazor skills to build. So let's create that. All right. And so now we've got our MAUI project. There's actually two projects here. The first one is sort of the core project. This one's the one that targets, if you look at the platforms, it targets Android, iOS, and Mac. And then we also, for Windows, there's a separate project currently. That's kind of an artifact right now of how WinUI works. That will eventually get merged into the core project. So a MAUI app, by the time we ship, should just be one project. But for right now, it's two. And in this MAUI project, actually, let me go ahead and get it running because getting the emulator going can take a second. All right, so in this MAUI app, we have, XAML, like you would expect in like a Xamarin-based application. But the XAML file, all it has in it is a Blazor web view control. It's like an embedded browser control that knows how to render Blazor components. And the components run directly in the app. There's no WebAssembly. They're not running remotely on some web server. They're running in that .NET process. So they can do anything that .NET can do in your native client application. This Blazor web view control is going to render a particular root component. In this case, we're telling it to run this main component. That's right over here, main.razor. If you've looked at a Blazor app before, this should look very familiar. This is literally the same code that you would find in a Blazor app. This is just setting up the Blazor router to route to all of the Blazor pages up above. Like here's our Blazor counter. Okay, so this should render a Android app with our Blazor application embedded. Yes, cool. So we can click on things. So this is working as a native Android app. This is not just a web application. It's running as a native app. And to prove to you that's really the case, we can actually add some native functionality. Let me show you also that Windows works. So I'm gonna to run the WinUI project in Preview 7, you actually have to deploy it first. So I'm gonna deploy it, and then we'll do a little bit of native, and then we'll pause for questions. Sorry for going a little bit long, everyone. All right, deploy succeeded. Yeah, so there's my MAUI app 1. So this is now a, where'd it go? There it is, okay. So this is now a native desktop app. We've got a native mobile application. Both of them work exactly the same because they're using exactly the same UI. And we can do native things. Let me show you just a little native trick. Let's add some native functionality to the Windows app. I'm going to add this. Let's go into the index.razor file, and we're going to add a little bit of code here. So I'll walk you through this real fast. We've got a heading that's going to display a message, and then we got a button that when we click it, it gets a message. And now to get the message, it is going to use an advanced text editor. It's going to fire up Notepad. This is not something that you can do normally from a web app, but because we're running as a native application, we can do stuff like this. We're going to fire up Notepad, create a file, and whatever they type in that file, we'll read it back in and then set that to the message and display that on the screen. Okay, so let's see if we can fire up Notepad from our Blazor components in a .NET MAUI Blazor app. So let me redeploy. Oh, I'm going to need a using directive. System.io. Great, save, and we'll deploy. Oh no, what did I do? Oh, except it's still running. One more time. Come on, deploy. Great. Okay, so now let's run our MAUI app. And we should now see a button. I did, right? So we got hello. And I clicked the button, and it opened Notepad. That's crazy. And this is from like, web tech. And hi, everyone. I'm going to save that, close it, and we're able to read it in. So yeah. So this is a hybrid application built with Blazor using .NET MAUI. Definitely go check that out in .NET 6 as well. All right. We're pretty much done. We're going to skip this. By the way, you can also do it with WinForms and WPF apps as well. So if you want to add a Blazor web view control to existing desktop apps, you can do that too. It's a great way to modernize apps if you're looking for a way to get to the web or to get to .NET MAUI. .NET 6 is shipping in November of this year. It's our next LTS release. We're shipping a major .NET release every year. So .NET 7 will be in November of the following. Definitely check out the latest preview release, which was .NET 6 Preview 7. It was released yesterday, and you can get it by going to .NET/get.NET 6. And with that, I'll stop, and hopefully we still have a few minutes for some questions.
Yeah, thank you so much, Daniel. This was really, really amazing. I really like these live demos. I think they are, they can showcase so much.
No problem. Yeah, you never know what's going to happen sometimes.
We have a bunch here of questions. I think we'll just start here from the start, and then we see how far we can come here. So actually, the first question was actually about what you spoke about in the last section about the .NET MAUI. So this question is from Gopal. He says that I'm interested in knowing more about the .NET MAUI schedule. To be precise, we have a new app to be developed. So should we start that app in Xamarin, or should we go for .NET MAUI?
That's a great question. So .NET MAUI is on the .NET 6 release schedule. So it's scheduled to ship with .NET 6 in November. I mean, it's really part of .NET 6. .NET 6 is kind of interesting in that you have like the core SDK now, and then you have these optional workloads that get like tacked onto it as needed. MAUI is one of those workloads that's tied to the .NET 6 SDK. It is in preview. So if you were to build with it now, there will be bugs, there will be issues. Yeah, so if you're willing to sort of live on the edge and you really want to use the latest tech, then I'd say, yeah, go for it. If you're trying to deliver something that's, mission critical in the next 3 months, I would go with Xamarin initially. And then what we're doing there's a bunch of people that have existing Xamarin apps as well that will probably want to move to .NET MAUI. .NET MAUI is effectively the next version of Xamarin. We're working on updating the .NET Upgrade Assistant, which is a tool that you can run on existing apps to modernize them to use MAUI Core and the latest tech. You'll be able to point that .NET Upgrade Assistant to a Xamarin Forms-based application to upgrade it to .NET MAUI. So if you start with Xamarin Forms, you're actually in a pretty decent spot. And then later when you decide to move to MAUI, that migration should be very straightforward. So if you want to start with something stable, I would say start with Xamarin Forms and then look to move to .NET MAUI, maybe as early as like one of the release candidates. Like the Preview 7 was our last preview release of feature preview release for .NET 6. The next two preview updates will be release candidates in September and October before the final stable release in November. So RC1 and RC2, those should be fairly complete and stable releases. So you might go kick the tires at that point. Or if you don't want to play with fire, just wait for the general availability in November.
Okay, great. And the next question is from Morten Runge. He says, how does app.mapget work with dependency injection?
Yeah, great question. So you just add another parameter to the delegate that you pass in that comes from services. So like, let's say you configured a DB context, like an Entity Framework Core DB context as a service. You can just pass in a DB context, add a DB context parameter to the delegate, like those little lambdas that I was creating, and that will automatically get bound to services. And you don't even need to attribute it. Like I think in a controller in the past, you actually had to put like, from service as an attribute on that parameter. We added a new feature in .NET 6 where the runtime can actually inspect the container and ask it like, do you have a service for this type? And so it knows which types are available as services, and then it will automatically bind. So just add a parameter and it will just work. You can also bind to other things. So I showed binding to the body. I showed binding to route values. We just talked about binding to services. You can also bind to like the current user. You can bind to the request and to the response and to the HTTP context.
Okay, great. Next question is from Gopal. He said, how can you add JWT authentication or integration with Azure AD in this minimal API style? Or is it so that we can use the host builder in the same way as in a normal app by using the web application.create builder?
Yep, it should be the same code. What you do is just like any code that you used to put in configure services in a startup class, just move that to the builder.services.add whatever, like that section at the top of your program.cs file. Any code that you used to put in configure, where you like configured middleware, that's where you put in the app.use or map section of your program.cs file. So that code just moves to those spots. The same middleware should just works the same way. I mean, it is the same app builder. We just took the same runtime constructs that we've had in Asymmetric Core forever and kind of repackaged them in a simpler model. But the core middleware pipeline is exactly the same. That hasn't changed. DI is exactly the same. That hasn't changed. Actually, the map get methods themselves existed previously. We've added some more overloads to make them more convenient to use. And those overloads were enabled by a whole bunch of cool new C# 10 features. But all the stuff that MinAPIs is building on is stuff that's been around forever. So the code should be pretty much what you had in Startup CS, just moved into that program CS file.
Okay. So next question is from Ashish. He says, question about API performance. Is it better to host .NET 6 in Windows Server or Linux Server?
I mean, you're going to get great performance either way. Like it's going to be phenomenal performance either way. I believe the Tech Empower numbers that we were looking at, those are Linux numbers. So we get fantastic performance on Linux. We care deeply about Linux, like particularly for like the container-based style development. So we invest in both. I think you'll be happy no matter which platform you go on. So use whatever you prefer. Performance should not be the deciding factor. It's more about like what do you need from the underlying platform.
Okay. And then Gopal, he asked, are .NET 6 container images already available on Docker?
Yes, we shipped container images with every .NET 6 preview release, so you should be able to get them. I think from Docker. But the images are definitely available. I'm trying to actually let me look real quick. I haven't used the container images in a while, so I don't actually know where you find them these days. Richard Lander probably has this in his blog posts. Let's see. So if we go to announcing .NET 6 Preview 7, this is Richard's announcement blog post. I'm guessing he has something at the top about container images right there. Okay, so that's where you can go and find the latest .NET 6 Preview container images.
Nice. And then also from Gopal, does .NET New support .NET 6 templates?
Yeah, absolutely. All of our templates are part of the SDK. That's where they come from. Like when you actually create a template in Visual Studio, it's actually coming from the SDK. When you install new SDKs, any templates that were contained in that SDK get surfaced by Visual Studio in tooling. So yeah, all the templates that I was doing in Visual Studio, you can .NET New your way to victory. So like the empty ASP.NET Core template, that's just .NET New Web. That's the equivalent of empty. The MAUI template, like there's a .NET New MAUI-Blazor. Once you've installed the MAUI workload, yeah, all the templates are there in the SDK. .NET New Angular, .NET New React, they're all there. So you can do that from a Mac. You can do that from your Linux machine if that's where you prefer to dev.
Now we switch theme here to Blazor. Morten Ronge, he says, what is the F# MVB support for Blazor?
Yeah, good question. So, I mean, .NET is a kind of a language agnostic runtime, right? Like it runs .NET IL. It doesn't really care what language that IL what language was used to produce that IL. But the one constraint that we do have in ASP.NET Core is that Razor syntax, like the .razor files and the .cshtml files, those are a C# based language. We basically take that mixture of HTML and C# and turn it into a C# class. So those things need to live in a C# project. We do have F# templates, I believe, for ASP.NET Core, and they use some trickery with runtime compilation in order to get around the limitation with .razor files. So we do have F# support. I don't believe we have VB templates for ASP.NET Core. We have talked about potentially adding them for at least the web API template and like the worker service template, but probably not for like MVC, Razor Pages, Blazor, because of that dependency on Razor. There's no VB HTML in ASP.NET Core.
Okay. And now a more general question from Jonah Anderson. She says, is it possible to migrate existing old legacy.NET framework to .NET 6 without too much effort, time, and refactoring? Is it advisable, or is it better to start from scratch?
Great question. So it depends a little bit on what type of app we're talking about. If you're doing like WPF or WinForms, like the desktop apps, the .NET 6 versions of those frameworks, I believe, are pretty highly compatible with what you have in .NET Framework. If you're talking about a ASP.NET application, particularly like a web forms application, then it's a lot more work, because we in .NET 6 we pretty much rewrote ASP.NET and built ASP.NET Core. And ASP.NET Core is not a compatible framework with the old ASP.NET framework. So moving from ASP.NET to ASP.NET Core is a much more significant investment. For a large app, think months, as opposed to like not something you can do in a day. Now that said, there is a bunch of code that you still get to reuse, like libraries that like just business logic. All of that should just work. For the most part, your ASP.NET agnostic code, you can just carry that over. But rebuilding the UI stack on top of ASP.NET Core will take some work. The good news is that a lot of like at Microsoft, we have large properties built on .NET Framework. Like we have tons of .NET code across Microsoft that runs many of our biggest properties, and it is work for even us to make this move from old .NET Framework code to ASP.NET Core based .NET 6 code. But we're doing it, and the reason why we're doing it is because the cost savings are dramatic. Like you just save so much because the performance is just so much better. You get dramatically better COGS, cost of operating for your services. So there's a lot of interest right now in terms of for upgrading. We are trying to help. There is the upgrade assistant. Let me bring that up. .NET upgrade assistant that you can take a look at. That's something you can run on an existing project, and it will kind of get you going. What is this guy here? Yeah, this is the .NET Upgrade Assistant. So this is a tool you run on the project, and it will upgrade like your CS Proj to use the new modern CS Proj style. It will swap out namespaces and package references. It will do as much as it can, but it is not a magic button where you like push the button and poof, have a .NET 6 ASP.NET Core app. I mean, it is closer to that with like WinForms WPF, with an ASP.NET app, you'll still have a fair amount of work to do afterwards. There's also migration guidance and docs on the in the .NET documentation that you can look at to help you start figuring reasoning through that. But I would say it is work, but it's worth it. Like it's it's good stuff. At the same time, if you have existing code that's working and you're happy with it, there's also no need to move. .NET framework and web forms will be supported for a long time. Those are part of Windows, so they are supported along with Windows. And so as long as Windows is supported, you should expect those things will be supported. So don't feel like you have to move. It's more a question of, do you want to, like, are you trying to modernize and you want to get to the stack? Then this is the path that you take. StackOverflow.com is a .NET based application. They were on .NET Framework. They somewhat recently completed their move to ASP.NET Core. It took them months, and they know .NET really well, and so it took them a significant amount of time. But their performance was so much better after they moved. Like they had what was it? They had like CPU tripwires in their tests that if the CPU wasn't above a certain amount, then they assumed that the app must not be working. But after they moved to ASP.NET Core, they hit these tripwires, but the app was working fine. It's just that it was so much more efficient. It just was barely exercising the hardware. So it is a much more performant framework.
Mm-hmm. And Gopal, he says, while migrating from .NET 5 to .NET 6, do you recommend to use the new minimal API style, or can we keep most of the things as it is and just change the version?
You should just keep your code as is. There's no need to like switch your controllers over to Min API. I mean, if you're trying to like squeeze out some performance someplace, then maybe you would consider that. But no, the existing class-based model is definitely something that we actually imagine that people will kind of grow up to, right? Like when you get to a really big app, having good patterns that you use inside the application to handle lots and lots of API endpoints, I think the controller model has a lot of benefits there. So no, you don't need to migrate anything. This is more for new users that are being introduced to ASP.NET Core for the first time, and we're trying to avoid them having to learn 10 different things just to get Hello World running. We want them to get up and running as fast as possible. Think it's more, APIs are more for that scenario. Like it's still very powerful. You can build large and very functional apps with just the Min API pattern, but you should not feel that you have to migrate in any way.
And Morten, he says, this is about Blazor, and he says, how does the ahead of time compiled binaries do performance-wise compared to plain JavaScript?
Yeah, that's a tough comparison. I mean, we're more comparable now. I mean, there is. It's certainly true that we're kind of on uneven footing when you're comparing like a Blazor WebAssembly app to a pure JavaScript app. Like the browser literally comes with a JavaScript runtime, and that thing has been optimized for many years. I know JavaScript sometimes gets a bad rap, but in terms of execution performance, it actually is quite good. So I wouldn't say that with Blazor WebAssembly we're trying to be faster than JavaScript. I mean, we're running on their runtime. Like sometimes it doesn't. The question doesn't even make sense from, or the goal doesn't even make sense from that regard. But with AOT, the goal is that the performance is at least much more comparable, much more workable for CPU-intensive tasks. There are a bunch of tasks that with Blazor WebAssembly and .NET 5, it just wasn't really reasonable to do it without with just the IL interpreter. With AOT, you can now do way more things, much more interesting things in the browser.
And also a question here from Morten. He asks if you can hard code to a specific culture to get size reduction. Like, for example, we're in Scandinavia, and the invariant culture isn't the best choice, perhaps. Yeah,
there are optimizations you can make if you're just only need one culture. So you can get some improvements that way. Yeah, and I hear you that invariant culture is not for everyone. It doesn't work for every scenario. It was more just showing the point, though, that if you're not using the feature, there is at least now a way to link it out when you're publishing your Blazor WebAssembly applications. So yeah, you can big data files that you sometimes have to bring down with a Blazor WebAssembly app, like for time zone data and globalization data. You can basically use shards of that data that are specific to the culture that you need, and that can get you some of the size savings.
And a question about when you say Blazor UI web view, is it served locally or from a web server?
Locally. Yeah, I didn't have a lot of time to explain this. And a lot of people get tripped up by this. When we're talking about the Blazor web view control, the browser controls running in the app. That's an app that can run .NET code, right? Like it's a MAUI app or a WPF app or a WinForms app. It can run .NET code. So we just run your Blazor components in that app, in that .NET app. And then they render to the web view through a local interop channel. So we're not running in the browser using WebAssembly. You're not in the browser sandbox. You're running in the normal .NET process. You can call any .NET API you want. That's what I was trying to show with that launch notepad demo, is that if you want to touch the file system, you can touch the file system. You want to launch a process, you can launch a process because you're just .NET code running on the machine. And that's the beauty of it. So it's fast, full access to the native capabilities of the device, but you can reuse your existing Blazor components as is, unchanged, to help you build those native apps.
Okay. And is .NET MAUI scheduled to release on time with .NET 6, or is there any chance it may get pushed further?
Yeah, I'm optimistic that it will ship with .NET. .NET MAUI will ship in some form with .NET 6. There may be, it is a new framework. There's a lot of moving pieces. We'll see how it goes. Yeah, the plan is that it will ship with .NET 6 is what I would say. I mean, is it possible that something might not fully land by November? Yes, it's possible. Maybe we have to push a few things out. But, if that happens, imagine like, February or something like that as we get the full stable bits for MAUI. But right now, the plan is that MAUI is going to ship with .NET 6.
Mm-hmm. And Gopal also asks, can we use VPF or SAML UI controls with the MAUI apps?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, well, do you remember when I created the .NET MAUI Blazor app, the root page of the app was a XAML file, like it was a XAML page, and I didn't get a chance to show this, but in that XAML file, alongside that Blazor WebView control that was put in the XAML, you can put whatever other XAML you want. Like you could put native labels and layouts and whatever. So you can have a mixture of native UI controls, which MAUI is providing, alongside your Blazor WebView control. That is totally possible, very easy to do, and absolutely intended.
Good. Yeah, so just a couple of more questions here. One question from Till Wolf, who says, you showed us the new capabilities of program.cs. Does that mean that using a startup class will be deprecated?
No, startup class will be there forever. I'm not supposed to say forever. Every time I say forever, someone gets mad at me. The startup class is there to stay. I mean, one thing you have to understand about .NET is we care deeply about back compat. I hope it feels that way, particularly as we've moved into like .NET 5, .NET 6. Early in the beginnings of .NET Core, when we were trying to get our feet wet, building something that's cross-platform, and it was new, it was open source, things shuffled around quite a bit while that stack was getting up and running. Like if you were there in .NET Core 1.0 and 1.1, there were quite a few breaking changes actually in those days. But now that the framework has really matured, it is absolutely our goal that every release you should just be able to upgrade to the new version with like no compatibility problems. So startup, that will be there for a long time. No plans to remove it. We have years of content and apps and a legacy people using the startup pattern, and it's still a completely valid pattern. And so yeah, no, you don't feel like you have to migrate to anything. It's not going to be deprecated. It'll still be there.
Okay. And I think the last question is from Andreas. Is Visual Studio 2022 planned to be finished with all templates, etc., at the same time as the November.NET release?
I don't know if I'm allowed to. I don't know if they've announced publicly their roadmap, so I don't know if I can say. Well, I mean, you can maybe I'll get. You can kind of deduce it, right? Because .NET 6 is shipping in VS 2022. So yeah, I guess. Well, yeah. So we are closely aligned with our VS 2022 friends. Unfortunately, I'm not on that team, so I don't know if I can't remember what their public statement is about when VS 2022 is going to ship. If they've already said it and someone already knows, feel free to share it with the rest of folks. But I don't want to get myself in trouble.
I guess we just have to keep ourselves updated and see what it says. Yes, I think that's. Do you have any question, Oddbjørn, that you want to ask?
No, not really.
No.
I'm looking right now to see if they've already announced the VF22 release date.
Yeah.
I don't see it yet. Yeah, but we are closely aligned with them.
Great. Yeah, so I think with that said, I think we'll finish here for tonight. So we thank you, Dana, for a really great presentation, and we thank everyone who has been watching this live, and everyone who watched this also on the recorded session here on YouTube. And we will announce here on Twitter. So we'll be giving out a backpack for the best technical question, and in addition, there is a MS Learn challenge, a cloud challenge that you can participate in, and also stand a chance of winning a Microsoft backpack. So thank you so much.
Thank you, everyone. Thanks for having me. If I missed your question, feel free to reach out to me on Twitter at DanRoth27.
Okay, bye-bye.